Welcome back to So You Really Want to Learn Latin, and today we take bold steps by entering chapter 10 of book 3 of our course. We are very close to the end now. It's been quite a journey, I think you'll all agree, but we are very much on the home straight. And we are going to finish our course, as I've said, by looking at some of the great Latin authors. We're going to look at some of the great prose authors, and then we're going to look at some of the great verse authors. The sort of authors we are now able to cope with, or at least to tackle with some degree of confidence. We go through them in the book here. We've got Caesar himself, Julius Caesar, our old friend. Wrote a huge amount about his wars in Gaul and the Civil War, which give us a really good insight into the Roman world at that time, but of course also into the incredible ego of that man. He loved writing about himself. Then there, of course, there's Cicero. Cicero, probably the greatest orator who ever lived, maybe? I don't know, something like that. He's a amazing orator. And what is fantastic about Cicero is that so many of his speeches are recorded for posterity. Poor old Cicero was murdered the year after Julius Caesar was murdered, so it was a pretty gruesome time. Then, of course, there's a couple of historians, Livy, the great Livy, who wrote Ab Urbe Condita, a history of Rome from its foundation, Ab Urbe Condita. Livy, living during the reign of Augustus. Now, we'll talk a bit about Augustus in due course. He was the first Roman emperor and sort of inherited the mantle from Julius Caesar, to whom he was distantly related. He became his adopted son, but he was also his nephew. Tacitus, another historian, living under those early emperors. If you've seen I, Claudius, the television series I, Claudius, if you haven't, make sure you do see it. A lot of that is based on information from Tacitus and Suetonius. And then, Pliny the Younger is the dude who wrote about the eruption of Vesuvius, which, of course, buried Pompeii and the neighbouring town of Herculaneum. Pliny wrote letters, lots and lots of letters, which give incredible insights into the Roman world. Anyway, all of these prose authors are writing in what we loosely call classical Latin, and it is the Latin we have been learning. So we are now ready to tackle these guys. We've already had a little play with some adapted Julius Caesar. We're now going to look at pretty much raw Caesar from the Gallic Wars, and we're going to look at a passage which is of great interest to me, based here in the UK, where Caesar actually invades Britain. Okay, so we are on page 101 of our course, exercise 10.1. Okay, it's quite emotional getting so far into the course, but here we go. We're going to look at this slab of Latin. This is almost completely unadapted Caesar. It's as he wrote it, or near enough as he wrote it. Okay, and let's have a little look at it. It's, I don't know, you might find there's a bit of a step up when you tackle this stuff. But actually there's nothing in here that we haven't learnt how to cope with. A little bit of vocabulary, obviously. There's always vocabulary you haven't come across in the course, which you'll need a good dictionary to look up. But apart from that, there's no Latin that you'll think, hang on, no one told me that would happen, because we've done it all now. Okay, right, here we go. His constitutis rebus nacnes idoneam ad navigandum tempestatem Caesar equites in portum progredi et navis conscendere jussit. Right, first slab of unadapted Caesar. Now, all the rules apply that we've covered. Find the verb, look at the verb first, chunk it into clauses, don't take accusatives before you've taken the verb, all of that stuff applies. But obviously with a very long sentence, and this is quite long, you want to read it right through to the end, and we know that yusit is our main verb, third person singular. The subject will be a he or a she or an it. But having established that, it's perfectly okay to go back to the beginning and just see if you can pick it off pretty much in the order that you're getting it, and just take care. So I'll see if that works with this. So, his constitutis rebus. Now, ablative absolutes. Okay, we've done ablative absolutes. I often refer to them as scene setting. They're used to kind of set the scene, to establish what's going on before, the main action in a sentence. So, his constitutis rebus, with these things having been decided upon. Okay, constituo, I decide, past participle passive, in the ablative, agreeing with his rebus. Okay, now, I suppose if we were kind, we would have changed it around so it was his rebus constitutis, which would have been a little bit more obvious, but his constitutus rebus is just the way Caesar wrote it, so, we run with that. So with these things having been decided, nactus, now, nominative singular masculine, nactus, it's from nanciscor, to obtain. So nactus, having obtained, okay, deponent verb, past participle. Deponent verbs don't have past participles passive, they have past participles active, or deponent you might call it. So having obtained, and we don't know who yet, but he's a masculine nominative singular person. And our little check down the end of the sentence where we came across that verb yusit reassures us that the subject of this whole sentence is a nominative masculine singular person. Okay, so having obtained idoneam ad navigandum tempestatem. Right, tempestatem means a storm, typically, but it also just means weather. So, having obtained weather, idoneam, okay, suitable, ad navigandum, suitable for sailing. Okay, there's a lovely little gerund, ad navigandum, for sailing, literally to sailing, but we translate that as for sailing. So, having obtained weather suitable for sailing, Caesar. Now, there is our subject. He is the hero of this sentence. We're not that surprised to find him, because, it's a passage of Caesar, and he always wrote about himself in the third person. Caesar, now what did he do? Equites importum progredi et naves conscendere iusit. He ordered. That's what he did. Caesar ordered. Who did he order? Or whom did he order, I should say? He ordered equites. He ordered his cavalry. Okay. What did he order them to do? He ordered his cavalry progredi, to advance, from progredior, to advance in portum, into the harbour, et naves conscendere, and to embark, conscendo, I embark, I get up onto, et conscendere naves, and to embark onto the ships, okay, to get onto the ships. Okay, first sentence down, well done. Ubi autem cum primis navibus Britanniam attigit in omnibus collibus instructas hostium copias armatas conspexit. Okay, ubi autem, when however. Now remember, autem, it doesn't really mean anything in particular. It sort of does mean however or moreover, but it's there to link this sentence with the previous one. Okay, the Romans loved sentences all to be kind of joined together at the hip, and the way they did that was to make sure there was some kind of joining word in between the clauses. So when, however, cum primis novibus, with the first ships, Britanniam attigit, he touched Britain. So literally he touched Britain. You'd probably say he reached Britain. So when, however, with the first ships he reached Britain, in omnibus collibus instructas hostium copias armatas conspexit. There's our verb. He caught sight of, he saw. Now what did he see? He saw in omnibus collibus instructas, on all of the hills, in omnibus collibus, in all of the hills, or on all of the hills, instructas, drawn up. Now these drawn up things are feminine and accusative and plural. He saw on all of the hills, drawn up, copias, forces, they're feminine and accusative, plural, lovely, forces, hostium, of the enemy, armatas, armed. So when, however, with the first ships he reached Britain, he saw, drawn up on all of the hills, armed forces of the enemy. Okay. Legatis convocatis, Caesar ab eoloco circita milia passuum septem progredi constituit. Now we've got another abi there. Legatis convocatis. With the ambassadors having been called together, okay, setting the scene. Now we would probably say calling the ambassadors together. Caesar ab eoloco circita milia passuum septem progredi constituit. Caesar, down to the main verb, decided. What did he decide to do? We need an infinitive. Caesar decided progredi, to advance, to go forward. Back we go to ab eoloco, from that place. Circita, around milia passuum septem, around 7,000 paces. In other words, 7 miles. So he sees, armed forces lined up on the hills, overlooking the cliffs as he's coming into land at Britain. So he decides to go 7 miles further up the coast. At Barbary, consilio Romanorum cognito, equite suos praemiserunt, qui nostros e naribus egredi prohiberent. Okay. But Barbary, the barbarians. Okay, Caesar's referring to the British as barbarians. Not very polite. But the barbarians, okay, the subject has now flipped. It was Caesar, now it's a nominative plural. It's gone over to them. But the barbarians, concilio Romanorum cognito, there's another ablative absolute. I did say they were important little fellows. With the plan of the Romans having been learnt, cognito, okay, but the barbarians, having learnt of the plan of the Romans, equite suos praemiserunt, they sent on ahead, primito, to sort of send on ahead, they sent on ahead equite suos, their cavalry, qui, now I don't know if you kind of spot what's going there, but we've recently done one of these. Final clauses are introduced normally by ut and the subjunctive, but they can be introduced by the relative pronoun and the subjunctive. And that's, I think, what we're going to have here. So, they sent on their cavalry, qui nostros e nobis egredi prohiberent, who might prohibit, okay, in other words, in order that they might prohibit, nostros, our forces, and by our I mean Caesar's, he's the guy telling this story, prohibit our forces, egredi, to get out of, egredio, a nobis, out of their ships. Okay? So, but the barbarians, having learnt of the plan of the Romans, sent on ahead their cavalry to prevent our men getting out of the ships. Okay, okay. Naves propter magnitudinem nisi in alto constitui non poterant. Right. The ships. Here's our new subject. The ships. Propter magnitudinem. On account of their size, their magnitude, the ships, on account of their size, nisi in alto, unless in the deep, brackets water, unless in the deep, non poterant, were not able, constitui, to be placed, to be positioned. Now, constituo, we know, means I decide. In a military context, it can be to place, forces in particular places. And that constitui is the present infinitive passive. Think of rego going regi, to be ruled, constituo going constitui, to be positioned. So, the ships, on account of their size, were not able to be placed unless in the deep. Okay, so they, these ships had a big draft, kind of, to use nautical language, and they could only be they could only float out in the deep water. Militibus autem impeditis manibus magno et gravi onere armorum oppressis erat summa difficultas. Okay, so let's see what we do with that. Militibus, now that's going to be dative or ablative plural. We're kind of so used to expecting ablative absolutes that I'm instinctively thinking, I bet this is an ablative absolute. Trouble is, there isn't a participle with it. It's just militibus. So, we've got to look a little bit more carefully. Militibus autem impeditis manibus. Okay. Magno et gravi honore armorum oppressis. All right. Erat summa difficultas. Now, you've got to be patient sometimes in Latin. That sentence began with what looked like an ablative, but there was no participle, so it kind of might not have been. Then we had a whole load of words also in the dative or ablative, and it wasn't really obvious yet which, and we still didn't have a subject and a verb. Right at the end, we got to erat summa difficultas. There was the utmost difficulty. Okay, summus, utmost, highest. Difficultas is nominative singular, and the verb is erat. There was the utmost difficulty. Right. Now, if there's utmost difficulty, it's going to be for someone. So do you remember we were wondering, are those ablatives or are they datives? Looks like they were datives. So, there was the utmost difficulty, militibus, for the soldiers. Okay? Now, all these other things are in agreement with militibus. For the soldiers, impeditis manibus, with their hands impeded, okay, magno et gravi honore armorum oppressis, oppressed, okay, that is still agreeing with the militibus, oppressed magno et gravi honore, with the great and serious weight, honore, armorum, of their weapons. So there was the utmost difficulty militibus, for the soldiers, impeditis manibus, with their hands impeded, magno et gravi honore armorum oppressis, oppressed with the great and serious weight of their weapons. Okay, so, there was a bit of a difficulty for the soldiers because of all that stuff. Okay, his enim de novus deciliendum erat, et in fluctibus consistendum, et cum hostibus pugnandum. Now, here we've got a whole load of rather lovely little gerundives of obligation being used impersonally. So, look at what we've got here. His enim de novus deciliendum erat. Now, decilio, to jump down from. Deciliendum erat. There was a jumping down. There was a need to jump down. De novus, from the ships. His. Now, the obligation lies on the person in the dative. Okay, so to these men, the ones we've talked about, who are kind of weighed down by all their heavy armour, to these men there was a need to jump down from the ships. Et in fluctibus consistendum, and to stand in the waves, and cum hostibus pugnandum, and to fight with the enemy. Okay, so it's getting more and more exciting. Romanis autem morantibus maxime propter altitudinem maris is qui decimae legionis aquillam ferebat contestatus deus ut ea res legioni felicta evenerit decilite inquit milites nisi vultis aquillam hostibus prodere. Blimey, this sentence goes on a bit, doesn't it? Okay, let's just chunk it up. Romanis autem morantibus, ablative absolute, setting the scene. With the Romans delaying, more I delay, with the Romans delaying, autem, however, or moreover, maxime propter altitudinem maris, chiefly, maxime, chiefly, propter altitudinem maris, on account of the height or depth, maris, of the sea, well, obviously depth. So, with the Romans delaying, chiefly on account of the depth of the sea, is, nominative masculine singular, here comes our subject, is qui decimae legionis aquillam ferebat. He who ferebat, carried, aquillam, the eagle, decimae legionis, of the 10th legion. Okay, so we're homing in on the standard bearer of the 10th legion. He who carried the eagle of the 10th legion, contestatus deus, having called upon the gods as his witness, contestor, to call upon as a witness, having called on the gods as his witness, ut ea res legioni feliciter veneret, that, this is what he called upon them, that ea res, that thing, veneret, should turn out feliciter, well, happily, legioni, for the legion. Okay, so that's what he called upon the gods to deliver, having called upon them that that thing should turn out well for the legion. Decilite inquit milites, jump down, soldiers, he said. Okay, inquit, tucked, outside the inverted commas. So what he actually said was decilite milites, jump down, soldiers. Nisi, unless, Vultis, you want, Aquilam, the eagle, Hostibus prodere. Nisi, unless, Vultis, you want, prodere, to betray, Aquilam, the eagle, Hostibus, to the enemy. So jump down, soldiers, he said, unless you want to betray the eagle to the enemy. Ego certe, I myself certainly, down to the verb praestitero, now that's future perfect, active, I will have discharged. Praesto means I discharge, like I discharge an obligation or a duty. Ego, certe, certainly, praestitero, will have discharged meum, and then meum what? You've got to jump over reti publicae atque imperatori until you get to officium. I will have discharged my duty, officium, and then back we come, reti publicae, to the state, atque imperatori, and my general, i.e. Caesar. Okay, res publica, by the way, is a cool little noun, because the res bit is fifth declension noun, res, res, rem, rei, rei, re, and the publica is just an adjective kind of agreeing with that. So you get rem publicam, and res, res, rem, and genitive, rei publicae. Okay, so both halves of the word are declining according to their own conjugation. It's a little bit of a tricky word. Okay, so that's the famous eagle carrier of the 10th Legion who leaps into the water. Well, I don't want to spoiler, I think I may have just spoiled the story, because this is what happens next. Hoc cum voce magna dixisset. Right, when he had said this, hoc, that's accusative neuter singular, when he had said this, cum voce magna, with a loud voice, se ex nave proiecit, he threw himself, se proiecit, he threw himself, ex nave, out of the ship, atque in hostes aquillam ferre coipit, and he began to carry, ferre, aquillam, the eagle, in hostes, into the enemy. Okay, very famous scene from history, this. Tum Romani, then the Romans, ne tantum dedicus admitterata, lest so great a shame should be allowed, okay, universi ex nave desiluerant, universally, kind of as one, desiluerant, they jump down, ex nave, from the ship. Okay, wow, what a story that was. Okay, so that's Caesar at his best. He's bigging up his escapades in Gaul, and it's a wonderful little scene. You know, the Roman ships come up against the coastline of Britain, and, you know, first they see the Britons up on the hill, probably covered in woad, if you remember. Then they sail a couple of miles along the shore, but the cavalry, the British cavalry, gallop along to, you know, to where they're going to prevent them from coming ashore. The ships are in deep water, and you can imagine the soldiers thinking, blimey, I've got all this heavy gear I've got to carry. You know, big choppy waves and deep water they've got to jump down into. And on the shoreline, they've got the Brits, and it's all looking a bit spooky, and they don't really want to do it until the eagle carrier, the standard bearer of the Legion, calls on the gods, says, don't let things go pear-shaped for my Legion, and then into the sea he jumps. I am going to do my duty. I don't know what you guys are going to do. And, of course, everyone follows him. Great stuff. And there's another little passage coming up where Caesar, you know, leads his forces further into Britain. And all of this coming from Caesar's Gallic Wars. If you want to look up the real stuff, please do. Okay, now next time we are going to look at verse authors. Okay, just very briefly tell you how Latin verse works, and we're going to learn how to scan a hexameter line. So, you know, what's not to like about that. Okay, right, keep up the good work on this. Towel round the head, pat on the back. It's going incredibly well as we near the finish line. And after that, you know, the sky is the limit. Okay, see you back here on this channel very soon.